This video was brought to you by Patreon. Support my activism and gain early access to all my videos for only $1 a month. Ho ho ho! It's that time of the season again. A time to be merry, share gifts, and put lights around the house. Unless you're one of Jehovah's Witnesses. In that case, participating in anything Christmas related is equal to worshipping a pagan god. Yeah, no joke. You may already know that Jehovah's Witnesses don't celebrate Christmas, but have you ever wondered why that is exactly? Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the history of Christmas and Jehovah's Witnesses. When did the religion ban this practice? And the reason Watchtower gives on why this holiday is the crafty creation of Satan himself. Let's get to it. Believe it or not, Jehovah's Witnesses used to celebrate Christmas at one point. And they don't even try to hide it. This photo comes from one of their study publications, showcasing the last Christmas celebration that took place in their Brooklyn headquarters back in 1926. But what happened? How did they go from this to this? First, let's take a look at what the oldest publications of Watchtower had to say on the matter. The very first mention of Christmas in any publication recognizes that the holiday has pagan roots. Yet nowhere in the early years are the Bible students told not to celebrate Christmas. In fact, Charles Taze Russell, founder of the Bible student movement, the precursor of Jehovah's Witnesses, often showed appreciation for the spirit of generosity that Christmas is known for. Although he was aware that Jesus was not born on December 25th, and that this date was taken from pagan tradition, he encouraged his followers to exchange gifts during the holiday and to commemorate the birth of Christ. In this letter from 1910, Pastor Russell offers to send pioneers a special Christmas token, a small emblem of a cross and a crown, which would later be considered pagan as well. And at the end of the letter, he wishes all his followers a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. This man loved the holidays, that much is clear. So what went wrong? Just a bit of background info, Pastor Russell dies back in 1916, and after a series of sneaky legal maneuvers, Joseph Rutherford is now the president of the Watchtower Society. Remember this man, he will be important later on. Modern Jehovah's Witnesses believe that Jesus returned invisibly to earth in 1914 to choose a congregation for himself, and that by 1919, Jesus had already chosen the Bible students to be his unblemished people, free from the pagan practices of Babylon the Great, the empire of false religion. Still, 2 years later, the Golden Age magazine still held on to the pagan holiday of Christmas, encouraging Bible students to participate in holiday gift giving. Oops, I guess Jesus forgot to eliminate all the pagan practices. Things took a sharp turn on the December 12, 1928 issue of the Golden Age, with an article written by R.H. Barber titled Christmas, Its Origin and Purpose. Barber recognizes what Pastor Russell knew from the very beginning, that most of Christmas customs are rooted in pagan practices. Barber explains why he celebrated Christmas at one time, because to him it was appropriate to celebrate the birth of Christ and give gifts. Also because the holiday is popular and widely celebrated by Christians. He then cites a few encyclopedias explaining the pagan origin of Christmas and urges his readers to be cautious, saying that the devil himself is behind all false teachings and pagan customs, and people that participate in these lies fall under his control. Barber then goes 10 steps further, listing more reasons to avoid the holiday. Christmas fosters the spirit of envy. Most Christmas gifts are useless trinkets which will end up in the garbage. Telling kids Santa Claus exists will turn them into liars when they grow up. Santa Claus is literally the devil. Then Barber writes one crucial line, which would set the tone for the future of the Bible student religion. Thus, the so-called Christian church has been throughoutly paganized and has become throughoutly heathen. Pastor Russell had maintained a mostly positive view of Christian groups outside of his own, but now Joseph Rutherford took a completely different approach. Him and his team of writers believed all Christian denominations outside their own were plagued with pagan practices and thus apostate and far from God. and they made it their mission to distance themselves as much as possible from the rest of Christianity, or as they would later call it, Babylon the Great. This included ridding their religion of anything which Rutherford might consider pagan. Christmas was the first holiday to be shot down. Watchtower would become more extreme with the passing of time. In 1931, Rutherford portrayed Mother's Day as a ploy of Satan to incite people to creature worship, and it would take still another 2 decades for Christ's clean congregation to ban birthdays, calling them a pagan celebration and equating them with creature worship as well. After 1928, Christmas was entirely banned from the religion, and the vast majority of articles published after that would be extremely critical of the holiday. The Bible student movement, kickstarted by Pastor Russell, would later be renamed Jehovah's Witnesses by Rutherford, distancing itself even more from other Christian denominations. Now, we fast forward to 2022. Jehovah's Witnesses are still avoiding Christmas like the plague. So what reasons do they give for not celebrating it? Are these arguments based on the Bible or simply on the tradition of men? Let's check it out. A quick visit to jw.org will do. On this article made for the general public, we see why JWs don't celebrate. Reason number 1. Jesus commanded that we commemorate his death, not his birth. Okay, but he didn't tell us not to? If Jesus not commanding us to do something equals a command not to do it, then we can't do anything. Jesus didn't command us to go to the gym, so does that mean we shouldn't work out for those sweet, sweet gains? Seems ridiculous to me. Reason 1 is trash. Next. Jesus' apostles and the early disciples did not celebrate Christmas. Well, no, duh. Of course they didn't. This holiday didn't exist yet. The apostles also never played basketball. Does this mean we shouldn't? This reason is just as bad as number 1. Next. There is no proof that Jesus was born on December 25th. Yeah, most people know this by now. Most people celebrate Christmas because they enjoy celebrating with their families and giving gifts, not because December 25th is a sort of infallible date on their minds. Reason number 4. We believe that Christmas is not approved by God because it is rooted in pagan customs and rites. Well, is it true that Christmas is rooted in pagan customs and rites? Well, sort of. I think that description is overly simplistic. Jehovah's Witnesses tend to view things very black and white. Either something is based on the Bible, which is good, or it's not based on the Bible, which is pagan and evil and satanic. But Christmas is a little bit of both. This is a celebration which evolved over many centuries and which fuses both practices from the Roman religion and stories found in the New Testament. But if we consider the religions of Egypt and Rome and even the early Christian tradition to be pagan practices, then many modern events have at least partial pagan influence. This includes the days of the week and months of the year, many of them based on Roman gods. Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn. Should we just stop saying these names because they're based on pagan gods? Another example, the wedding ring, as we know it, originated in ancient Rome, based on the pagan belief in the vena amoris, where a vein runs from the ring finger straight to the heart. The practice of exchanging rings originated in medieval Christian tradition, a religion that Jehovah's Witnesses would consider apostate and part of Babylon the Great. Yet both the use and exchange of wedding rings are widely practiced by Jehovah's Witnesses. Why is the wedding ring not considered pagan by Watchtower? Another example which is even more blatant is the piñata. In a 2003 Awake article, we learned that the piñata actually developed independently in completely different civilizations. The Chinese use piñatas in their New Year's celebration. That's very pagan. The item eventually made it to Spain, where it was associated with Lent, another pagan celebration. When the Spanish made it to the Americas, they discovered that the native peoples were also using something very similar to piñatas. The Aztecs celebrated the birthday of Huitzilopochtli, the god of sun and war, with the breaking of a piñata, and the treats inside were used as offerings to him. The article even acknowledges that the Spanish would use the piñata to teach the natives about the Christian religion. It cannot get more pagan than this. If the word pagan was an item, it would definitely be this little guy. So Jehovah's Witnesses don't use piñatas, right? Since the use of the piñata is rooted in pagan customs and rites. Well, no. Using piñatas is perfectly acceptable to Watchtower. In the same article, Watchtower acknowledges that piñatas in our day are still mostly associated with birthdays and posadas, the posada being the week leading up to Christmas. Very pagan, yet apparently this is no problem. I quote, "We found that for many people in Mexico, the piñata has lost its religious significance and is considered by most to be just harmless fun. In fact, piñatas are used in Mexico on many festive occasions, not just for the posadas or for birthdays. When considering whether to include a piñata at a social gathering, Christians should be sensitive to the conscience of others. A main concern is not what the practice meant hundreds of years ago, but how it is viewed today in our area. Understandably, opinions may vary from one place to another. Hence, it is wise to avoid turning such matters into big issues." What the hell is going on here? So both Christmas and piñatas have customs originating in pagan rituals, and both things have lost their religious significance in the eyes of many people. So why is it that one is perfectly acceptable while the other one is condemned wholesale? I find this article on the piñata to be perfectly reasonable. We can even exchange words in the article, and the condemnation of Christmas falls completely apart. We found that for many people in the world, Christmas has lost its religious significance and is considered by most to be just harmless fun. A main concern is not what the practice meant hundreds of years ago, but how it is viewed today in your area. And how is Christmas viewed today in our area? Mainly as a family celebration. When you celebrate Christmas, people don't assume you are worshipping pagan gods. Hell, they don't even assume you're Christian. Even atheists celebrate Christmas. Even though Christmas originated from the fusion of pagan and Christian tradition, it has evolved beyond that, becoming almost a secular celebration and very commercialized at that, just like the piñata. So really, we see no logical reason why Jehovah's Witnesses can't celebrate Christmas. But is there anything in the Bible prohibiting its celebration? Well, no. Watchtower loves to quote from the Apostle Paul, so let's put him as an example. Paul found no problem in eating meat from animals that were sacrificed to pagan gods. Apparently, many Christian converts would feel eating this type of meat was wrong, but Paul had no problem eating this meat. He tells the congregation of Corinth that since pagan gods don't exist, they shouldn't get too hung up on the pagan origin of their meat. So then, about eating food sacrificed to idols, we know that an idol is nothing at all in the world, and that there is no God but one. And sure, later on in the chapter, Paul says that he is willing to give up meat entirely if eating it causes his brother to stumble. But that's the point. There was nothing inherently wrong with this meat, even if it had pagan origins. Paul was willing to refuse the meat, not because it was bad, but because others with a weaker conscience considered it offensive. No one in our modern age finds Christmas offensive. Jehovah's Witnesses are the only ones repulsed by the holiday. They're the only ones who find offense in it, who are stumbled by it. Following Paul's advice, if Jehovah's Witnesses celebrated Christmas, they would not be violating any Bible principles. Paul drives the point home in one of his other letters, Colossians 2:16. Therefore, do not let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink, or with regard to a religious festival, a new moon celebration, or a Sabbath day. These are a shadow of the things that were to come. The reality, however, is found in Christ. For Paul, what holidays a Christian celebrated was a non-issue. Observing the Sabbath day was part of the Jewish law, something Christians were not required to follow, yet he didn't find a problem with others observing it. Just like Watchtower said about piñatas, it is wise to avoid turning such matters into big issues. Yet Watchtower has turned Christmas into a huge issue. A Jehovah's Witness caught celebrating Christmas can be subject to be disciplined by the congregation. Celebrating a false religious holiday is equal to apostasy, and the member could be disfellowshipped and shunned if the body of elders decide he is unrepentant. Children are prohibited by their parents from participating in holiday activities at school, often leaving them feeling left out and forcing them to awkwardly explain why they can't draw pictures of Santa Claus or build gingerbread houses. This is all by design. By banning celebrations that should really be left up to personal choice, Jehovah's Witnesses separate themselves from other Christian groups and thus create an us versus them mentality. Isolation is a key practice of high control religions, or as we call them in this channel, cults. When JW children can't celebrate holidays with their classmates, they are often ridiculed, and this makes them feel left out, and they start to build a negative perception of the world. This makes them look for comfort, and then they fall back harder on their beliefs and on their JW community, thus further isolating them from the outside world.
My classmates and teachers always respected me, but this year things were different. My class was organizing a Christmas party. I was asked to help, but I refused. My classmates and even my teacher made fun of me. I went to see the principal because I thought he would understand me, but unfortunately he didn't. I felt I had been treated unfairly. After the conversation, I went home and immediately started to pray. I felt that the most important thing I could do was to uphold Jehovah's reputation. For personal study, I considered the Young People Ask book, chapter 20, How Can I Get Along with My Teacher? It contained Matthew 7:12, which says that you should treat others the way you want to be treated. And that was just what I needed. So, I decided to explain my position to the class. I raised my hand and asked whether I could explain my position. My teacher surprisingly agreed.
Banning holidays also works to indoctrinate potential converts to the religion. Watchtower knows that when a Bible student suddenly decides to stop celebrating holidays, this creates uncomfortable situations in the family. When their family is understandably hurt and opposes the student on their new beliefs, the student feels isolated and persecuted, and they fall back on their newfound community for comfort.
I started studying the Bible with Jehovah's Witnesses when I was 14. The moment I realized that God did exist, I was so happy and prayed saying, "I just assumed you didn't exist. Please forgive me." Right away, I told my family that I wouldn't be able to join the Christmas and birthday parties we cherished. My mother called all our relatives and spoke to them in tears as she told them that her daughter had joined a terrible religion. She even told my study conductor to give back her daughter. She felt like I was taken from her. When I observed those things, at times, I felt as if I was doing something wrong. But then, I knew that if I compromised, Jehovah would be sad. Jehovah had kindly let me know the truth. I strongly felt that in order to please him, I should not give up. It would have been easy if I had given up then, yet I knew that if I did, I wouldn't be able to draw my parents to the truth. I knew I could get emotional if I tried to talk with them face to face, so I wrote them letters instead. I prayed and kept telling my mother how much I appreciated her. Gradually, she realized that she hadn't lost her daughter and she was relieved. Now, someone is calling on her, and we have a very peaceful and pleasant relationship.
refusal to celebrate holidays is often portrayed as a show of loyalty to God and an essential step in the path to become one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Family members who are still celebrating are painted as corrosive influences to the new student. It's all really toxic, and it really divides families apart.
No, Jade, you listen. Isn't this just another of your phases? It's time to move on, love. The holidays are our time. It's all I get from you. Promise me you'll be here. Promise.
I really don't want to disappoint her, but I can't disappoint Jehovah.
Of course. You love them both. Don't you think he can help you? Talk to him.
I spent a long time pouring out my heart to him. And I remembered something from one of the Psalms. I will walk in your truth, unify my heart to fear your name.
As we have seen so far, the ban on Christmas is not logically coherent nor based on the Bible. So why do Jehovah's Witnesses not celebrate it? Well, because not celebrating Christmas has become a tradition in itself. All because of an author decades ago who suddenly decided Christmas was unacceptable and proceeded to write a scathing article on it, even though the very founder of the religion was well aware of the pagan aspects of the holiday and didn't have a problem with it. And now, since Christmas has been banned for decades, Jehovah's Witnesses will never admit that they were wrong. It takes humility to realize you have behaved like a religious fanatic in the past, and Watchtower does not have the humility to admit their mistakes. It's much more likely that Watchtower will impose new prohibitions on their followers in the future, rather than lifting old prohibitions. That's just how the religion works. Well guys, that was a short history of JWs and Christmas. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more fun times in the future. Thank you once again to my wonderful Patreons for their support. If you're feeling jolly this season and would like to support my activism with a donation, you can find ways to do so in the description below. Have yourself a Merry Christmas guys, and a Happy New Year.